It only moves when you look away. I won't say which city the storage facility is in, because the owner is still desperately trying to sell the section where this happened. If you see a listing for Unit 402 at a bargain price, just scroll past it. Some things are meant to remain locked away forever. My name is Mark, I'm 25, and I'm a reseller of junk from old storage units. My job is to win closed units at auctions, cut off the locks, and hope to find antiques or at least something valuable among piles of trash. That evening, I was standing in front of the rusty metal roll-up door of unit number 402 in the vast labyrinth of self-storage warehouses on the outskirts of the industrial zone. Everywhere there was the dim orange glow of sodium lamps, and the long concrete corridors echoed with my footsteps. I won this unit for only $50, suspiciously cheap for such a large space. The air smelled of machine oil, cold dust, and something Swedish that reminded me of old paper beginning to rot. I grabbed my heavy bolt cutters and with one sharp motion snapped through the old shackle of the padlock. The metal clanged against the concrete floor, and the sound echoed throughout the endless maze of storage units. I grabbed the handle of the roll-up door and lifted it with a loud rattle. Dust rose in a cloud, clogging my lungs, but what I saw inside made me freeze in confusion. The unit was completely empty, except for one old 1990s television with a large CRT screen, standing right in the middle of the concrete floor on a low wooden table. Around the television, as if in some bizarre ritual, dozens of old children's toys were scattered. Mutilated dolls without eyes, worn plush teddy bears, and plastic toy soldiers. The strangest part was that the television was on, even though there was no visible outlet in the unit. The screen glowed with static white noise, filling the dark space with a bluish flicker. I took a step inside, and the roll-up door behind me shuddered slightly, as if from a breath of wind, even though the building was completely silent. I approached the television, feeling a strange vibration in the air. Suddenly, the white noise disappeared, and a clear image appeared. My heart skipped a beat. The camera was filming the entrance to Unit 402 from inside, from exactly where the pile of toys lay. On the screen, I saw myself, Mark, who had just lifted the roll-up door and was standing on the threshold with a surprised expression on his face. It was a live broadcast, but the angle was impossible. I slowly began turning around to find the camera among the junk, but I noticed something else. The toys on the floor had changed position. Now they were all, as one, turned to face me. I felt cold sweat running down my back. I looked at the television screen again, trying to understand where the signal was coming from, and my breath caught at what I saw on the video. On the screen, behind me in the corridor in the background, a tall, dark figure appeared. It looked like a pile of old, dirty clothes and rags that had taken on a human shape, but without clear outlines. I spun sharply toward the exit, shining my flashlight down the empty concrete corridor. No one was there. Only long shadows from other closed units and the dead silence of the industrial zone. When I looked back at the television, the figure on the video had moved closer. Now it was standing right at the threshold of the unit, almost touching my reflection on the screen with its long, shapeless arm. The creature had no face. Beneath the hood of an old hoodie yawned absolute emptiness. a black hole that seemed to absorb all the light in the room. It was the Souvenir collector. I noticed that every time I looked away from the screen, the collector on the video took a step forward. He was trying to step out of the digital world into reality through the door I had so carelessly opened. On the video, the collector slowly began reaching toward my shoulder. I felt the temperature in the unit drop sharply, and my own breath began to come out in thick vapor, even though it was warm summer outside. I wanted to run, but my legs seemed glued to the floor. On the television screen, the collector was already standing right next to me. His empty hood tilted toward my ear as if he were about to whisper something. Suddenly, a sound came from the television speakers. It was not a voice, but the rustling of thousands of old fabrics rubbing against each other. It was the sound of my own name spoken through that rustling.
Mark.
I glanced at the pile of toys on the floor. Now each doll was wearing a tiny hoodie, an exact copy of the one the monster wore, and instead of faces, they had black holes. At that moment, the lights in the corridor outside the unit began going out one by one, bringing the darkness closer to my unit, and on the screen the collector had already begun stepping beyond the boundary of the television, stretching his material hand into the real world. The collector's hand that emerged from the screen was made of intertwined old scarves, children's socks, and dirty bandages. It moved silently, like smoke, reaching for my throat. Terror finally forced my muscles to obey. I jumped back toward the roll-up door, grabbing its cold metal edge. On the screen, the figure was already halfway out of the television, filling the unit with its rotten smell. I yanked the roll-up door down with such force that the metal let out a deafening groan. But the door jammed halfway. Something soft, like an old down jacket, was stuck in the tracks, preventing it from closing. I saw the collector in the real world beginning to materialize directly from the air near the television. He had no weight. He glided across the floor like a shadow, leaving behind a trail of dust and old junk. Again and again, I pulled at the roll-up door handle. Before my eyes, the toys on the floor began flying toward the creature, entering its body and becoming part of that horrifying pile of things. The collector was already a meter away from me. His empty hood lifted, and I felt the chill of a grave emanating from that void. He extended his shapeless hand, and his fingers almost touched my shoulder. At the last moment, I noticed my bolt cutters lying nearby. I grabbed them and struck the door track with all my strength, knocking out the piece of stuck clothing. The path was clear. With a wild scream, I threw my entire weight against the roll-up door. The metal door slammed into the concrete floor with a crash, cutting the collector off from the outside world a fraction of a second before contact. I didn't stop there. With trembling hands, I pulled a new padlock from my pocket, slid it through the loops, and locked it forever. From the other side of the door came a faint, barely audible sound, the rustle of fabric against metal. I threw the keys to the other end of the corridor and ran toward the exit of the storage complex without looking back. I left all my expensive tools there, my car, and part of my sanity. A few days passed. I quit my reseller job, sold my share of the business, and tried to start a new life by moving to another part of the city. I assured myself that Unit 402 was just a closed box with ghosts of the past. One morning, I found an envelope in my mailbox. It was yellowish, without any return address or postmark. It smelled of cold dust and old clothes, the same smell that had haunted me at the warehouse. I went into my apartment and tore open the envelope. Inside was only one old Polaroid photograph. The image was grainy and dim, but I recognized my own bedroom. In the photo was me. I was sleeping in my bed, covered with a blanket. The picture had been taken last night, judging by the time on the digital clock captured in the frame. But that wasn't the horror. In the background of the photograph, in the large mirrored wardrobe, the reflection of the corner of my room was visible. There, behind the armchair, stood the same tall figure made of rags. The collector had not remained in Unit 402. He had simply chosen a new storage space, my own apartment, and in the photograph, his hand was already resting on the edge of my blanket. I slowly lifted my eyes from the photograph and looked at the wardrobe mirror standing opposite me. In the real world, the corner was empty, but when I looked back at the Polaroid, the figure in it had already taken a step closer to the bed. I realized that he was not in the room. He lives in reflections and memories, and every time I look at this photo, he comes closer in my reality. When rusty buttons and warm human teeth appear in your box instead of a hot dinner, know that they have come for you. Dan met a client who doesn't walk, but glides smoothly across the floor, and now that rustling sound echoes in his own bedroom. Find out why some bills are better left unpaid.